Hi, and thank you for joining me on this brief session, Ideas for Volunteer Activities. And this particular session is tied to the larger webinar I did earlier titled Strategies for How to Attract and Train the Best Volunteers. So if you're catching this one on YouTube, just know that there is a fuller, longer version webinar that will be linked in this video, so you can check it out if you are interested. So what we covered in the previous webinar, and just to do a brief remembrance here, especially for those who may have found themselves to this one first, volunteers are allowed in nonprofit and government sectors and not in for-profit organizations. Volunteers have either completed a career, perhaps in libraries, archives, or museums, and they're retired, or they have a current career, but it is outside of the library, archive, museum field, or LAM field you may hear me use. Also, oops, sorry, too quick. Also, there is no expectation of benefits in the form of compensation, reciprocity, claim donation on taxes, or gained experience. Volunteers are volunteering out of the goodness of their heart for that feel-good factor to support an organization whose mission they believe in, those types of things. There's no, other than the good feels, there's nothing that is given for their time and attention and experience and energy. Also, for volunteers, activities are to support the LAM organization as a priority. Um, they can enjoy the activities that they're doing to help you out, but the activities are chosen because that's what the organization needs and is not a priority so much as what the volunteer wants. So, distinction there. Also, these volunteer activities should support staff, not replace staff or supplement staff duties, because when you get into that, you are violating best practices for our field, and you are also contributing to the devaluation of the work that we do, because if higher ups and other people see us having volunteers do collection work, the work that we do for free, unfortunately, that will also have them wonder why they are paying us and compensating us for work that does require professional level, higher degree attainment, experience, specialized skills, etc. So, several reasons as to why we should not be doing that. Also, volunteer work is conducted on a part-time basis. This is not to have volunteers come in all day, every day throughout the week, because that's what paid full-time staff is for. Also, supervision is provided on an ad hoc basis for volunteers and is not a requirement of the ongoing volunteer activities. So that's more to draw a distinction between volunteers versus interns, whereas interns are there to gain education and experience and should have more of that hands-on supervision. Okay, now next slide. So one thing that I didn't have time to dig into in the previous webinar, and what we're going to do here for this little video, is we're going to get into some more specifics on ideas. And this is difficult because we all are in different circumstances. We all have different settings, different types of resources at our disposal, different varying levels of staff. And so it's hard, I think, for a lot of consultants to provide concrete ideas in terms of what are good activities volunteers should work on. But I do have some guidelines for you in terms of what are things to think about, what do those examples look like, and it will inevitably be up to you as the person working in your organization to verify that the activities that are suggested here aren't taking away from what is your work and responsibilities, so not doing that devaluation piece, and that they're appropriate for the volunteers that you have at your organization. We are all in different geographic areas. We all have access to different types of volunteers with different education and experience and skills. So what may be possible at one organization with having volunteers help with the collections management system may not be possible or a good idea at a different institution that doesn't have that type of volunteer cohort, at least not yet. So with that in mind, here are some ideas to think about, and here's the general list first. Identify problems or potential problems. So have volunteers be your eyes and ears and conduct a bit of an analysis with that fresh perspective in terms of what are volunteers that are sorry, what are problems that are present or could be present. The next thing to think about is have your volunteers add to existing products. So things that may exist, can they be fleshed out further? Can we add to it? Things that wouldn't take away from your job, but would help support and build on the job that you're already doing as a paid collection worker. Related to that is creating added value products. So added products was that second bullet, developing existing ones. This third point is adding products that aren't necessary or required for your organization, but provide added value. So that's maybe broadening content that you have available. Maybe that's adding additional services that are possible thanks to the volunteers. So things that have that added value but aren't required, so they're not taken away from your job, but they still support the overall organization. And then for this fourth bullet, have them offer insight in and ideas on how to remix what is currently available. And we're going to get into specifics right now. So thinking of those four, each of these four bullets is an example with some more specifics on what that might look like. So um, conducting a gap analysis, an assessment, whatever you want to call it. If you have volunteers that are very observant, maybe they have a little bit of a background in libraries, archives, or museums. Maybe they know what might be missing or not. Maybe they've been with you for a very long time. Have them use that, have them use their somewhat outside perspective to help inform you and your work on what is missing, what could be added to, what looks like it's in bad shape and maybe needs to be prioritized higher. So all of those things that we as collection workers may not have the time or capacity to do as frequently as we would like, or at all, having a volunteer be able to help you do that doesn't take away from your responsibilities, doesn't devalue your work, but it helps support your overall job and therefore support the organization as well. So there's one idea. Another idea is to, thinking about adding to existing content, ask them to craft fuller collection and item descriptions in the collections management system. So this is for volunteers who maybe want to spend a bit more time with the collection items, who have a gift for being able to write narratives and descriptions. And while you may already have collection and item records in your system, there are always those collections where we know that they would benefit and be more accessible to researchers if they had better descriptions or more fuller descriptions. We all have those records in our systems. And so if you've got a volunteer, this is not asking them to do the cataloging. That's not their job. That's your job, probably. But have them add to it, have them make it better, have them increase the findability of these records, and it also allows them time to spend with the collections, and getting to know them better. So this is one that I often used when I was still traditionally employed and was one of the more favorite projects for both of us because the volunteers get to work with the cool stuff, but also it makes my content in my CMS better and more findable. And so that made me very happy too. The third one is create new outreach content. So this is brand new content versus existing content. So if you have volunteers that are interested in helping you do that outreach piece, especially in pandemic times, if we're having to do stuff remotely, having them make videos where they discuss the collection, maybe they're showing some of the collection on their computer, having them do blog posts that feature items within the collection that gives you the volunteer gives them a space to talk about what they're finding and their perspective, offering it as a volunteer. and other things like social media posts, articles, etc. Anything that helps get the word out there about your collections, but also doesn't actually take away from what your responsibilities are. This is just added value and it's helping get that word out. And the last one is ask them to help you evolve how the collection content is offered and how to help gear it towards different audiences. And this sort of taps into the Breaking with Tradition webinar I did with Bridget Pride last month, which I'll link to in this video. And having your volunteers, which offer a different perspective, they come with different backgrounds, they represent different communities, they can sometimes more easily see the ways in which we can offer our collections in a better, more inviting way, especially if they're not from a library, archive, museum background. That is actually a benefit here in terms of using them to help us think about how we can offer the collections in different and usually better ways. So that's one more way to work with volunteers that doesn't take away from the work that is your work. So it doesn't devalue collection work, but it does add value to it. So if those specifics don't quite feel right to you for the moment, and or even if they do, here's some ways to go about it in terms of creating your own ideas and brainstorming those. So here are some prompts to think about. What are the items on your list that are important but never reach the top of your to-do list? So they are, if they are items that are going to get done, they'll be done by you, but they're not important enough where they're actually part of your position description or regular duties. That might be a good candidate or a good activity to have your volunteer do if you are already consumed and can't get to it. Another prompt to think about are what are the activities that would make your job easier to do? So if your job, for example, is to help catalog items into the collections management system, while we don't want to take away from that or devalue that work, there are certainly ways in which volunteers could help you do that work. Maybe that you set up a spreadsheet template for the catalog fields, and maybe there's like 3 fields that the volunteers can help fill out in terms of maybe they find the location of the item, maybe they help add in some descriptive words, maybe they measure it for like the form and extent. So thinking of ways where they can help you do your job better and faster without doing your job for you. And the last prompt to think about are what are the activities that can help inform your work, collection priorities, possible grant projects, etc. So what are sort of the activities that you can deploy your volunteers into that will help make your job easier, maybe will help you prioritize things better. So this is getting to some of like that gap analysis or collection assessments that we talked about in the previous slide. Where can you help deploy volunteers as an extension of yourself to help inform your work and help make your work more effective and efficient? So remember, while the volunteer activity is hopefully enjoyable, the priority is that the activity benefits the organization. So it's about what you need and what your organization needs, not necessarily what the volunteer wants to do. It's great if it matches up, but you need to remember that's how the dynamic is supposed to be. Then you also need to remember that there's no compensation in this. That's one of the key differentiators in terms of what a volunteer is. What they are getting out of this is an enjoyable experience, the good feels, helping support an organization whose mission they believe in. And then the final thing is that the activity must be separate from paid collection work or internship work. So we've spent a lot of time making sure that we're differentiating in this conversation how volunteer activities help support and add value to your work, help inform your work, but it's not doing your work and devaluing it. So that's a key thing to keep in mind because we don't want that to happen. We don't want to perpetuate this issue that is unfortunately very pervasive right now. So those are the things to keep in mind in terms of what volunteers are there for, how we can use them ethically, and how we can use them effectively in terms of what works for us and our organizations. And I believe that is my last slide. So thanks for tuning in for this brief deep dive into potential volunteer activity ideas. Don't forget to check out the larger webinar if you came into this in a different way. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. My information is listed in this YouTube description. Thank you.